Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ Resurrection Part 1 is officially happening, but the sequel is already shaping up to be even more controversial than the first. Back in 2004, The Passion of the Christ was a huge hit, especially with American evangelicals, and it also did well internationally. The movie was mainly inspired by the Gospel of John, but it also pulled in a lot of Catholic traditions and even referenced the visions of Anne Catherine Emmerich, a mystic from the late 1700s. However, the film stirred up a lot of controversy, particularly over accusations of anti-Semitism, a criticism that wasn't helped by Gibson's own personal controversies at the time. Gibson has been talking about making a sequel for years now, and it's finally coming to fruition. The Passion of the Christ was undeniably one of the biggest biblical epics Hollywood has ever produced, so it's no surprise that he's trying to turn it into a sort of franchise. And in today's landscape, where franchises tend to pull in bigger audiences than individual actors or directors, it makes sense for Gibson to revisit the story. The real question is whether he can strike gold twice, especially with the same evangelical audience that responded so strongly to the first movie. Gibson has never shied away from hinting at a follow-up to The Passion of the Christ. Since its release, he's mentioned several times that there's more story to tell. The first film ended with Jesus' crucifixion and a brief glimpse of his resurrection, so naturally, the sequel will delve deeper into what happens next. But what's particularly interesting is that the sequel may not focus solely on the resurrection itself. Instead, it could explore the time between Jesus' death and resurrection, a period that some Christians believe includes Jesus' descent into hell, also known as the harrowing of hell. This concept opens up a lot of possibilities for Gibson's storytelling, especially since he's known for taking creative liberties. Many scenes in The Passion of the Christ weren't directly from the Bible, but were instead inspired by various religious traditions. So, if the sequel follows a similar approach, we could see a mix of biblical narrative and artistic interpretation. The sequel has officially been titled The Passion of the Christ Resurrection Part 1, which strongly suggests that it's going to be a multi-part project. In fact, Jim Caviezel, who is reprising his role as Jesus, has hinted that it might even be split into 2 or 3 films. This could allow Gibson to explore the resurrection story in much greater depth than we've seen before. Though the movie was originally listed for a 2024 release, there have been some delays. Filming was initially expected to begin in the spring of 2023, but as of now, it's still in pre-production, with a potential release date pushed back to 2025. Despite the delays, Gibson and his team are actively working on the project. According to Randall Wallace, who co-wrote the script with Gibson, this has been a passion project of his for years. Wallace, who worked with Gibson on Braveheart, said back in 2016 that he always wanted to tell this story, and he believes the sequel will be even bigger than the original. One of the biggest pieces of news about The Passion of the Christ Resurrection Part 1 is that Jim Caviezel is returning as Jesus. Caviezel's performance in the first film was one of his most notable roles, and since then, he's continued to work in film and TV, appearing in shows like Person of Interest and movies like Paul, Apostle of Christ, where he played the Apostle Luke. His return to the role of Jesus is a significant piece of the puzzle for this sequel. But Caviezel isn't the only original cast member coming back. Maia Morgenstern, who played Jesus' mother Mary, is also expected to reprise her role, which will be key, given the emotional weight she brought to the first film. Francesco De Vito, who played the Apostle Peter, is also returning, and there are rumors that Christo Jivkov might come back as John, though nothing has been confirmed for him yet. The return of these actors after nearly 20 years adds an element of continuity to the film, which will likely appeal to fans of the original. It also gives Gibson the chance to build on the relationships between these characters, many of whom played crucial roles in the first film. Although the plot is being kept under wraps, speculation has been rife. As mentioned earlier, there's a lot of talk that the movie won't just focus on the resurrection, but will explore the events that happened between Jesus' death and resurrection. The idea of the harrowing of hell has been floating around for a while, which would mean showing Jesus' descent into hell to free the souls of the righteous. This isn't explicitly detailed in the Bible, but it's a concept found in various Christian traditions and could make for some powerful dramatic storytelling. Considering Gibson's tendency to blend biblical text with other religious influences and creative vision, the sequel could dive into lesser-known parts of Christian theology. If the harrowing of hell is a central part of the story, it would give the film a more supernatural angle than the original, which mostly focused on the physical brutality of Jesus' final hours. Additionally, the first film was notorious for its intense depiction of violence, and it's possible the sequel will follow a similar path. While The Passion of the Christ was criticized for its graphic nature, some argue that this was part of its appeal, particularly among evangelical audiences who appreciated the visceral portrayal of Jesus' suffering. If the sequel keeps this level of intensity, it's bound to generate just as much conversation and controversy as the first. Speaking of controversy, it's almost certain that The Passion of the Christ Resurrection Part 1 will face scrutiny. The original film faced accusations of anti-Semitism, and while Gibson has defended his work, these accusations are likely to resurface with the sequel. In fact, some Jewish groups may once again criticize the way the film depicts certain religious figures and events, especially if the sequel delves into more speculative territory like the harrowing of hell. Adding to this is the fact that both Gibson and Caviezel have been involved in off-screen controversies. Gibson, in particular, has faced significant backlash for his personal conduct, including a drunken rant in 2006 that was widely condemned as anti-Semitic. Caviezel, too, has been part of the controversy surrounding his recent film Sound of Freedom, which was both a financial success and a lightning rod for criticism. These off-screen issues could impact the reception of The Passion of the Christ Resurrection and potentially overshadow the film itself. Ultimately, the big question is whether The Passion of the Christ Resurrection Part 1 can achieve the same level of success as the original. When The Passion of the Christ was released in 2004, it was a cultural phenomenon, grossing over $600 million worldwide and becoming the highest-grossing R-rated film of all time. It appealed strongly to religious audiences, particularly evangelicals, who praised its depiction of Jesus' suffering and sacrifice. However, the landscape of cinema has changed since then, and it's unclear whether the same audience will turn out in droves for the sequel. Franchises like The Chronicles of Narnia and God's Not Dead have proven that there is still an appetite for faith-based films, but can The Passion of the Christ recapture its former glory in a world where superhero movies and blockbuster franchises dominate the box office? Gibson is banking on the idea that there's still a hunger for epic biblical storytelling, and with the return of key cast members and a story that promises to explore even deeper theological themes, the film certainly has the potential to be another hit. But with its controversial director and star, combined with a subject matter that's already sparking debates, it's going to be a fascinating film to watch unfold, both on screen and off. Well, that's it for today. The big question now is, can this sequel resonate with audiences in the same way as the first, or will it be overshadowed by the controversy surrounding its creators? What are your thoughts? Will The Passion of the Christ Resurrection live up to its monumental predecessor, or is it destined to stir up more controversy than success? Let us know your opinion in the comments, and for more updates, subscribe to our channel.